Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another Western Kentucky University Global Learning Forum. Tonight, we have a really exciting conversation about some of the trade-offs between study abroad and sustainability. And I'm really delighted to be joined here by a student from Western Kentucky University, whose name is Maddie Petty, and Professor Leslie North, who's in environmental studies at Western. And we're going to be talking a little bit about some of the different trade-offs in the experience that people can have, as well as the environmental impact that study abroad can have. So I'd like to ask my colleagues to introduce themselves. First, Dr. North, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, lovely to be here this evening. So I am Dr. Leslie North. I serve as Director of Sustainability for the university, and I also am an Associate Professor of Environmental Studies in the Department of Earth, Environmental, and Atmospheric Sciences here at WKU.
Great. Thank you for joining us, Dr. North. Maddie, can you introduce yourself?
Hello, nice to be here. My name is Maddie, and I'm a student. I'm an environmental studies major with a concentration in sustainability in the geography and environmental program here.
Great. Thank you and welcome. So many of us are aware of the multitude of benefits that students receive from studying abroad. And those include, of course, there's the opportunity to go and experience another country, another culture, to eat new food, meet new people, see completely different things, to learn different ways of the people approach problems and the people solve problems. Also, we know that when a student who has studied abroad, they're more likely to graduate, about 20% more likely to graduate. They're more likely to stay in college and complete college. And also, and this is something that every student needs to be aware of, upon return, their GPAs tend to go up, usually about a tenth of a point at least. And that's even more pronounced for students who are first generation students or underrepresented and minority students. So students going abroad have a lot of different gains from studying abroad. So, Western Kentucky has been engaged in study abroad now for a very long time. We've got a lot of really good study abroad programs. And frankly, I'm really delighted that Dr. North is one of our faculty-led study abroad program leaders. And she takes students to Iceland. So, Dr. North, can you tell us a little bit about some of the things that you see in students when they study abroad, when they join you to Iceland or somewhere else?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it truly is a one-of-a-kind experience. And I always tell our students that you will learn more about yourself and about a subject matter in 2 weeks going abroad and learning in those locations than you will learn for sure in 4 years in a classroom. You just cannot beat that immersive type of experience. You learn not only about the places, about the topic, whatever the topic matter might be for that particular study abroad course, but you also learn a lot about yourself and really where your convictions lie and what you're capable of and pushing the boundaries and going to unique places. So, you see it as an instructor in the courses where you have a group of students and we meet. As you said, I teach the Iceland study abroad course. And so we meet ahead of time before we get to country, and you see those students in the classroom and the things they're discussing and their interactions with one another. And in just a very short amount of time, 2-3 days in country, you can already see them kind of start to transform and to grow again as individuals and their understanding of the subject matter. So I truly think there's nothing like it. And it is certainly an opportunity that, if at all possible, every student should take advantage of as many times as they possibly can.
I can't agree more. I can't agree more, Leslie. I've had the pleasure and honor of working with so many faculty and so many students over the years who have studied abroad, and just watching what happens to them, before they go and when they come back, and all the different things that they experience in between. It's really a remarkable opportunity. But it can also have some costs, can't it?
Absolutely. Everything comes with a cost, right? There's always benefits, but everything has a price as well, and not just a monetary one in this sense.
Yeah, we have this seems like everything that we do, there's some form of an exchange that goes along with it. And what we'd like to talk a little bit more about tonight is, so on the one hand, we have an opportunity to really help students develop and to grow and to become more competitive in the marketplace and to be better students. On the other hand, when you put a bunch of students on an airplane and buses and trains and all manner of things to get to wherever it is that they're going, that has an impact, doesn't it? Now, Maddie, I understand you've done some research on this. Tell us a little bit about that, will you?
Yeah, of course. So I have been a part of the Sustainability Programs project this past year to calculate WKU's carbon footprint. And that's essentially just adding together all of the carbon emissions from your collective activities. And in this case, we're calculating WKU as an institution, how their activities, including things like studying abroad, how that impacts the environment.
Wow, that's amazing. It's really great to be able to understand the things that we do and then the impact that they have. And so that we can maybe make some better choices about that, or at least be aware of the impact of our choices. So now, how did you, that's an awful lot to put together, right? People commuting, the bus that goes up and down, takes you to Kroger or whatever, as well as keeping the lights on or the air conditioning on or cutting the grass and all those other activities. How do you figure all that out?
So the calculator that we use, it's called the Scimap calculator, and it includes 3 different scopes. So I can show you here. I'll go to the main page. So the first scope is direct emissions, and that includes, you can see, stationary fuels, transport fuels, fertilizer, animals, refrigerants, and chemicals. And then there's a scope 2, and that's energy purchased and sold in the case of renewable energy. And then the third scope includes things like commuting, business travel, and study abroad, which we'll talk more about. And then student travel to and from home, food, paper, and wastewater.
Cool.
Yeah.
So it sounds like it's also two-sided too, right? Because I was just thinking of like the carbon footprint of things that we put out there. But then I noted when you said renewable energy, it sort of gives you an opportunity to get it back. Is that correct?
That is correct. There's also, it's worth mentioning that we have sinks as well. You see the compost, sequestration, and offsets. So if you've ever purchased offsets when you're flying, that's something that goes against the carbon emissions that you're putting out, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I always thought that was kind of strange. You spend $1,500 for a plane ticket, and then you spend $5 in a carbon offset. Okay, so who gets it? And somebody's making some money in between. And how many trees is that going to plant? And is it really going to make a difference?
Yeah, it just probably depends on the programs that are in place with different organizations, like different airlines.
Sure. Well, we'll talk about that one some other time maybe. But let's talk about the impact that our study abroad travel has. Now, I know just me personally, I tend to fly, well, at least before COVID, I flew an awful lot, probably more than I really wanted to. But, and I imagine, I've always sort of thought about my carbon footprint on that, but I always thought, well, I'm doing really good things. So, it's going to ultimately be good for the planet, right? So we rationalize ourselves out of it. Let's walk through a little bit how you do that with the study abroad program.
Yeah, so recently I did reach out to the study abroad department, and I basically asked for information on students, where they were traveling individually, and I was able to calculate in passenger miles what their totals were for faculty and staff study abroad for both the 2018 and 19 academic year and the 2019-2020. And Dr. North, would you mind explaining a little about passenger miles?
Yes, of course. So when we do these calculations, they are based on a per passenger mileage. So what is the amount of miles of the air travel that is a person is participating in from their originating location to their ending location? Now there are some levels of I don't want to, inaccuracy in a sense, just in the case where if you have a person and they might have multiple stopovers, those additional stopovers wouldn't necessarily be included in the calculation. In some cases they are, because the actual airline ticket can be reviewed. But in other cases, we are just looking to get an estimate of how many miles has a person traveled from the originating location to the ending location. And this is per person, so it's not per trip. Or per plane. So if you have 10 students on a study abroad course, there would be a passenger mileage, how many miles that particular passenger traveled per trip, regardless of whether that person is on that plane with 10 other students who might be on the same study abroad experience. This is done in a sense because if a student is taking that spot, then they might have to bring another plane to fly to that particular location because of demand. So that's why, again, it's per person, not per flight.
Yeah, the United States sends about 500,000 students, well, again, prior to COVID, and certainly after COVID. The United States sends about 500,000 students abroad every year. Western Kentucky, we send about 550 students abroad. So what did that look like, our footprint?
So I was able to use the destinations that individuals were flying to, and basically I just multiplied that value by 2. And we had to do a lot of assumption because obviously we don't know the case for every single individual where their layovers were. So we assumed that they started in Nashville and flew to the largest city in the country that they studied abroad in. And we use this value to calculate the passenger miles. So I can show you, let's see. In 2018 and 19, the total for passenger miles was 5,286,854 miles, which is a large number. I was very surprised at that.
That's a big number.
Yeah. And then it's also interesting to me that in 2018 and 19, when COVID hit in the spring study abroad programs were included in the total because they did fly there and back. But the summer programs obviously got canceled, and the passenger mileage was less than half of what it was the previous year. And I know that study abroad is like a huge thing at Western, and I know that there was probably just as many, if not more, students studying abroad or planning to. So I know that that's just like a huge jump in my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you were completely correct on that. Fortunately, everyone did come home, and everyone came home safely in the spring a year ago. My goodness. But there were a lot of disappointed students who couldn't travel over the summer. And so that's quite a change. And it really, when I saw that number, I thought, oh my goodness, we need to really think about this. What we're contributing an awful lot, well, not an awful lot, but we're making a contribution to global warming. We need to make sure that we're making at least an equal and opposite contribution, to students and their growth, and, to making things better in the world. So, Dr. North, can you talk about a little bit about let's say, in Iceland, and I mean, you're talking about sustainability in the environment when you fly out there to Iceland. What kinds of things are your students learning that help them become better citizens?
Yes, there's a lot of irony in our course in this sense, in that we are flying to Iceland, so we have a carbon footprint associated with us getting in country. And the central theme of our course is the perspectives and realities of climate change and sustainability. So, and that's why I say it's a bit ironic that we're going to study climate change in Iceland, since, of course, it's one of the places where you can really see the visual immediate changes. Just in the course of a few days over the summer, you can see extensive changes that happen because of the warming climate that they're experiencing. But we are also contributing to that warming climate on our, in our trip while we're there, not just getting there, but also activities in country. So one of the first things that we discuss is just that, from a sustainability perspective. And one of the things that, any professional such as myself in the sustainability field, we're always trying to convey the importance that it's not about making a lot of sacrifice necessarily. It's not about, preventing yourself from doing all of these things. It's not about saying, I'm never going to leave my house because I don't want to have any kind of emissions associated with travel. It's about making sure that the choices that you're making, that they are being outweighed by the positive outcomes that are going to come from that experience. So if we can have, yes, a carbon footprint and associated with our travel to Iceland, but those students can learn and can see the glaciers melting. They can learn about strategies for effectively communicating about climate change while they're in country, while they're seeing these things. They can go on tours or hear perspectives from the individuals living and experiencing these changes every single day. If they can then take that knowledge, come back home, and spread it even further, then the reach and the benefits that we're getting from those courses far outweigh the cost that's associated with the carbon emissions or the other environmental implications that might be associated with our travel. And that's really what we're always trying to accomplish, is again, making sure those benefits outweigh some of those costs. And that's, you're always going to have some kind of cost associated with anything. And again, I don't mean cost as in monetary, but in this case, the environmental implications that come from those experiences that we're creating. So if you can find that balance, and if we can have those students come back and talk to another class, talk to their friends and family, decide that they want to be engaged in some other kind of project that's going to teach about climate change, or come back home and realize that they need to change some of their local behaviors to have a lesser impact, then it was worth it in the end. And that's what we're always trying to accomplish with any sustainability goal that we have on campus or even broader.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's so, really thinking about and communicating the impact that we have and to make some of those good decisions. Maddie, when you went through this data and as you looked at it, did you want to study abroad, or were you like, oh boy, I don't think I should do that?
So I came into college, I'm a sophomore, and I came in wanting to study abroad. I knew that I wanted to study abroad. And I actually was planning on doing a semester, and it would have been this semester, but, life gets in the way, COVID gets in the way. But so seeing these numbers, it makes me feel guilty for having that as a goal. But then hearing things like this, like the positives outweighing the negatives of like higher impact in the environment, I think that is a really big trade-off. And I think that I still believe that traveling is a really big way to grow, and it's something that I still really want to do. And I think that it would definitely be a positive impact on me and on my future, how I choose to live in the future, as Dr. North was saying.
Great. Yeah, how I choose to live in the future. Go ahead, Dr. North.
I was just going to say, going along those lines, I'm sure several students, and yes, when Maddie, she got these initial numbers, she of course immediately sent them to me, and I think we all had the shock value of, I knew it was going to be a lot. One of the things that stood out to me is it shows just how much summer study abroads we do at WKU, that of course this still included fall and spring of that academic year. It was just summer that really wasn't included. So that's a huge chunk of students that we're sending abroad in the summertime. But building upon what Maddie was saying, is it really is making sure that you come out of the experience a better person and a better citizen for the future. Again, with our course, obviously we're learning about the environmental implications or things that might be going on in a particular location, but it doesn't matter what your study abroad topic is. You can learn about those cultures and being, respectful of those cultures. You can learn about yourself and how you want to interact, with other individuals, and to really embrace the diversity that we have on the planet and the challenges that we face, whether they be societal changes, political challenges, environmental challenges, whatever they might be. Learning those things makes you a better citizen, and makes you a better, steward of the planet, regardless of what that topic is. So I definitely think that those benefits can far outweigh if you really want them to, and you're dedicated to that being part of the mission of the experience.
I also
Go ahead.
I also think that seeing those things firsthand is definitely something. It lights a fire under you to want to make those changes that are necessary, and then spread word about it, obviously, because when you see things firsthand, you're more likely to be able to better explain it to those around you and why you do the things you do, why you live the way that you do.
So you are only taking into account, and that's quite understandable, the flight over and the flight back, and then probably assuming, well, they're going to, you're going to eat in Bowling Green, or you're going to eat in Iceland. But there are some other choices that you can make, for example, like about eating and the kinds of things that you choose to eat. So, if I go to Iceland and, I'm looking at the menu, I'm a little homesick, so maybe I want that cheeseburger, or maybe I'll go for something local and have cod. How does that impact even though it's not in your model, but how does that impact, the equation writ large of our carbon footprint?
Every decision that you make is having an impact in one way or the other. So, going back to what Maddie was saying earlier about the footprint calculator that she's using and that tool that she showed you very briefly. So that tool for an institution, we have to determine how much food are we using in dining services at WKU. What percentage of that is coming from local, so within 150 miles, versus how much of that is being shipped across the planet to get to us. We have to calculate, how much paper is being used, how much, as she said, fertilizers are we using to grow products if we are growing them locally. All of those things very much matter. So from an institutional carbon footprint, we can certainly do those things, and we have those data, and those metrics are able to track. As you suggested, when we do think about it from a study abroad, and specifically the implications of a study abroad experience on a carbon footprint, it really does get down more to the individual. And there's actually, free carbon footprint calculators that people can use online, and you can input information. The ones that we're using are much more advanced. We have to pay for the services and those because they have a lot more capabilities, but there are free tools that allow people to do those things. And it looks at what is your food choice. Iceland, there are some cattle. There's certainly a little bit of a cattle industry in Iceland, but it's primarily sheep is the main livestock that they have in that country. If you are to get a hamburger or something along those lines, odds are it probably was imported. Not exclusively. Again, there is a cattle industry, but that meat product was probably imported. Versus if you were to order cod, that came likely in Iceland, as I've watched it multiple times. They actually tour a cod processing facility. That cod probably came from feet away before it got to that restaurant. So there is no transportation emissions that are associated with that food getting to you. So if you are in a place, and this is why I say you learn as much about the culture and the people and how things operate as you do the subject matter, because you learn about, why is cod the cheapest item on the menu anywhere you go in Iceland? Here, if you get like some fancy fish dish, it's probably going to be one of the more expensive items. And Iceland is the cheapest item by a long mile. And that's why, because they didn't have to pay to have it imported. It didn't come from far away. The fishermen went out that morning. They got it off their boats. Most of their ships are actually run by solar panels or other types of renewable energies. They're truly fascinating. Cool. So there's very little emissions associated with it. Came to the docks, and now it's in the restaurant hours later. So yes, those are all things that have to be factored in we just can't factor them in for what Maddie's doing, but you can certainly as an individual and be mindful, of those things that you're doing.
Sure. So one of the other things that struck me about Iceland when I first went there was the way that, well, Iceland, gee, it must be really cold. And even in the summer, it was cool. But they didn't have power plants. They didn't burn coal or burn wood. They used geothermal energy, which was just mind-blowing to me. The radiators literally just went right down into the ground and took hot water and ran it through. So it was hot in my hotel room. It was hot. Can you talk a little bit about some of those different ways that they function in a very sustainable way in Iceland?
Yeah, so again, it's kind of ironic. So our students go and we hear about coal, and we've switched from coal to natural gas burners because it does have less of a carbon emission. And we discovered this in part in the impact that just that change would have on our carbon footprint by, the previous students who did the work that Maddie's doing. Well, over there, as you suggested, they use geothermal energy. So it's renewable energy. For those of you who aren't familiar, this basically is about using the heat energy at the center of the earth to supply hot water in many cases, as well as enough steam to turn turbines. You turn the turbine, you generate electricity. So whereas here we would burn coal to boil water to produce enough steam to turn a turbine. So they just don't have to burn anything to get the turbine spinning. So their problem actually isn't, if you go to houses, they don't have hot water heaters. They actually run the piping of water around the outsides of the buildings or across the landscapes to cool it down before it gets to homes. But we have several colleagues in Iceland, and they will tell you the running joke in the country is the perfect way to keep the most ideal temperature in your home is to open all the windows and then turn your heat on full blast. Because that you have the balance of the cool air outside and the warm, super hot heat from the geothermal energy facilities. Our students hear that and they are like mortified because you don't, you shut everything. You try to plug every crack in every window or door to conserve energy and to make sure you're not losing heat or cool energy. But for them, it's just a different mindset because they have virtually zero power bill. Their energy doesn't have any carbon footprint associated with it. As I said, hot water, Icelanders are known for their long hot showers for those kinds of reasons because they don't have hot water heaters. They can just run water, and it does vary in some parts of the country. They don't have those luxuries, but it's learning about the culture. And when we teach about things about how to lessen your carbon footprint in our country, that doesn't just pick up and plop over and apply to every place in the same way. They have other challenges that they're looking towards when it comes to things like carbon emissions. The fact that, we have city centers, they have a population in Reykjavik where you have a large portion of the population, but then they have very remote little communities. And so getting resources to them, you might have to drive around a fjord. If the bird's eye flight might be just a few miles, but to get to that community, you either have to build a tunnel or you might have to drive 100 miles to go up and down the fingers of the fjord. So they have other ways that they are trying to lessen their carbon footprint. We have things like energy production because particularly here in Kentucky with coal, that's not their concern. So they get to focus on other things, and seeing and being able to learn about all of those, I think gives students a much broader understanding of the content matter for sure.
That's so interesting. Leslie, one of the other parts of the world that fascinates me in terms of sustainability is China. And no country has ever experienced the rate of economic development, and then, of course, the subsequent rate of creating pollutants into the environment. In the case of China, it's coal and cement production, as I understand it. But one of the things that has really kind of blown me away about China is, first of all, they're acutely aware of the impact and their environment because there are so many people smashed into that country, a lot of which is really uninhabitable or difficult to live in. But they have developed a lot, electronic scooters, and their public transportation is really good. The fast train system is amazing. And so, they're thinking very carefully about the environmental impact. And now I know that you've spent some time in China. Is that correct? How familiar are you with some of the things that are going on in China in terms of their environmental activity, and what might we learn from them?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those situations where innovation comes from challenge, right? So we don't usually invent things or try to break the mold of our thinking until we're kind of pushed against the wall. I think it's just human nature. So they face these challenges. They have health issues that they've been concerned with. They've had criticisms on the world stage because of some of the air pollution. And so they've been forced, and not just China, it's several places in the region, they've been forced to really be innovative and to come up with solutions to some of these problems. And again, I think that's where it's important to go and see those, to see that what you hear on the news, that some of the greatest technologies that we have regarding sustainability right now are coming from the places that we hear, oh, they're terrible with regard to sustainability, and the idea of globalization in general is that now, again, if we're going to have businesses who have, their toes in a lot of different countries, and we're going to send people across the globe, now we can share those technologies. Iceland can travel to places in the Caribbean that are also volcanic in nature, and they can share the lessons learned, what works, what doesn't work when it comes to geothermal technology. So I think it's fascinating, and the idea is to really learn as much as we can from each other, which is, again, why I think it's important for people to travel, for people like Maddie and she can certainly comment. I never asked her the question, but I'd be interested to see, what has she learned about just carbon footprints and carbon emissions in general, just from having to dig down and look at these data and all the different things that she's had to collect. And I'm willing, again, I'm guessing, but I'm willing to think that she didn't necessarily think some of the data points were things that were even associated, right? We think carbon emissions, you think, oh, energy plants, exhaust from a car, but it's a lot more than that. So, Maddie, I am curious, now that I have you on the spot, what kind of have you learned just by doing these other types of applied experiences as well?
Yeah, so before I started this project, whenever I thought of a carbon footprint, I thought of, if you've ever done an online calculator for yourself, I've done multiple of those, and always, I'm like way above the consumer level that is sustainable because of the way that I grew up, the way that most Americans grow up. But it really has made me think differently in terms of institutions, because I know that large companies, corporations, institutions like colleges are a lot of the reason that carbon emissions are so high. So it is really interesting to see all of the things that go into it. And I just never even realized, like, things like food. I definitely think about that kind of stuff way more than I did last year. Even being an environmental studies major last year, this year, it's just, I think of things a lot differently.
Yeah, where your food comes from, that's a whole nother issue. And again, going back to the study abroad, are you going to go to a country and eat the convenient foods that you're familiar with, or are you going to eat the things that are truly local and from there? And it kind of works the other way, right? So if we have visitors from those other countries who come to WKU to study, are they going to try to seek out some of those foods that they're more familiar with, or do they want to try some more local vegetables that were grown down the road from a farmer that we can grow here in Kentucky? So it's always a two-way street, but it's certainly, once you dive into carbon footprinting and understand all of the sources and the things that go into it, I think it truly is just, it's fascinating, and you can dig down, you can be down a rabbit hole and never even know it very quickly.
Yeah, and it's a great rabbit hole to go down and think about some of the different ways that, that we can just make small choices that make a huge impact. Well, we have a couple questions from our audience. Diana Howard asks, what are ways that we can be to live a more sustainable lifestyle in Bowling Green? What are your thoughts on that? Maddie, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so I actually, conveniently enough, I have been vegetarian slash vegan the past month or so, just trying it out for fun with one of my friends. And that's definitely a way. It's hard to change your food, the way you think of food, because I grew up eating meat. This is the longest I've ever gone without eating meat since I was a baby, before I ate foods like that. And that's definitely a way to reduce your carbon footprint because of the agriculture industry, and just I think also methane is a big problem in greenhouse gases as well, and that's something that's given off by the animals that are raised in agriculture. And then also something that I've really been looking into, I'm moving into a house in Bowling Green, and all my roommates and I want to like do all these sustainable things. Like I'm going to ask for a compost bin for my birthday so that we can compost all our food. And then also we want to do little changes like the sponges that you use whenever you're washing your dishes. You can get biodegradable ones that last way longer too. Another thing is dishwasher detergent. Apparently that's really, I think it's because of the plastic that they use for the jugs. There's a lot of really innovative things online. Like there's little sheets of dishwasher detergent, laundry detergent. Mm-hmm. It's sheets of laundry detergent that you use rather than the liquid for the jugs. It's little stuff like that that honestly adds up a lot. And I think me being so interested in it for the past few years, it's rubbed off on my friends, and it's something that they also are invested in, and that's really encouraging that I'm going to have 5 roommates that are all just as dedicated to it as me, and they just want to learn from me. So yeah.
Maddie, that is so awesome. Leslie, what are your suggestions?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Maddie really hit it home run with that one, in the sense that truly food choices are a big one. And again, food, not to kind of harp on that again, but it is one that we don't realize. The average food travels 1,400 miles before it makes it to your plate. So think about that. 1,400 miles your food has traveled before it even got to you. And again, there's a whole host of implications associated with that when you have the actual transportation that it took, the planes, the trains, the automobiles, the boats, whatever it took to get it to you. We have to change our growing practices, because now we're picking, say a tomato when it's green, because it's got to travel 1,400 miles before it gets to you. So we can't pick it ripe, because then it will be rotten by the time it gets there. So certainly food choices, as Maddie also said about meat, and even, Meatless Monday, if you've heard that term. Just cutting out meat. You don't have to become a vegetarian. You don't have to become a vegan by any means. But if you just cut meat from one meal, it is incredible the amount of impact you can have by literally just one meal a week, committing to, I'm not going to have meat this one meal. And in part, yes, it is methane, because methane has the ability to hold 25 times more heat capacity than carbon dioxide. So we hear about carbon dioxide from a footprint and a carbon footprint, but when it comes to greenhouse gases, methane is actually far more dangerous in a lot of ways, because it can just absorb so much heat. So there's less of it, thankfully. But as that number continues to grow upwards, and we end up with methane matching the amount of carbon dioxide, which I don't think we'd ever get to that number. But you don't have to have as much as methane to have just as much impact as you would from burning coal. So again, little changes like that. Certainly plastics, cutting out plastics. Plastics are made from oil, and they don't biodegrade. So we have to do something with them when you throw that recycled that bottle away, and it either is going to go to a landfill or it's going to go to recycling. But even then, in recycling, it's not a flawless system. There's still emissions into turning that product into something else. So cutting out bottling, reusing bottles as much as you can. I actually encourage, this is live streaming on Facebook, and there are tons of like Facebook groups or other groups across other social media platforms where people are just like the viewers, or just like all of us were at one time, where we're just kind of learning and stumbling through, and what's a new product that you found, and what worked and what didn't work, and join those and just be engaged in the conversation. Ask, if you're not familiar with what some of the strategies might be successful. For sure, I think educating yourself is probably the best thing that you can do. And that's probably the easiest impact that you can have, is just being more conscious about your consumer choices. That hands down, if you can walk, enjoy it. It's good for your health. It's good for your mind and your soul, and it's good for the environment. I'm not saying you need to always walk by any means, but maybe walk if you get a chance every now and then, or, just those kinds of things. Carpool. If you're going to Louisville and you and your friend are both going to Louisville, carpool, that sort of thing. Little changes. It's not about drastic things by any means, because those aren't sustainable in the long run.
I really appreciate the conversation about food. I always love talking about food.
It's a fascinating one for sure, especially in the world of sustainability. It can talk about rabbit holes. You can definitely dive in a rabbit hole with food very quickly and sustainability.
I mean, one of the, I moved to Kentucky from Colorado, and sure, there's definitely agriculture in Colorado, and there's a decent amount of local agriculture, but one of the things that has really made my heart sing is, going out and buying seasonal produce from Amish farmers in like Scottsville. And boy, that has not gone 1,400 miles. I'm absolutely certain of that. Now, I don't know in terms of the amount of fertilizer that's used, because, we know one guy who's all organic, and he says that some of the others aren't. That strikes me. There's some amazing produce that comes out of our area, in Bowling Green. Another thing is, and this, this is something that I've always had kind of a hard time wrapping my head around as an American, but foods are seasonal. I mean, in the United States, you can get avocados all the time, and tomatoes all the time, and oranges all year round, and lemons all year round. But that ain't right.
Correct. And that's where that 1,400 miles comes into play.
Yeah.
Because you can grow it somewhere in the world. It's just not here. Yes.
And I think we miss so much when we lose that seasonality of our cooking and celebrating. I used to travel to Germany a lot, and to Freiburg, which is, they've been sustainable. I mean, they've been working on sustainability for literally hundreds of years in the Black Forest, maintaining a forest that would always be very productive. But the asparagus season is very short, and it was almost a national holiday when the asparagus season came about, and everybody, and I'm like, oh, well, you can always get asparagus. I don't know what the big deal is, and I think we lose something from losing touch with the different seasons and the foods that grow in the seasons, and when they're very, very most flavorful and best. And it's sad that, as you said with the tomatoes, that we grow something 1,400 miles away, either maybe in Quebec, Canada, or down in Mexico, and it gets pulled off the vine when it's green, and somehow when it gets to our salad, it's red. There's just kind of something wrong with that.
Absolutely. And again, these study abroad experiences, and to kind of back to there. So in Iceland, ironically, use tomatoes as an example. They have geothermal greenhouses that they're using to grow tomatoes because of that very thing. You can't grow a tomato in Iceland outside. Not very, very short growing season for outside vegetables, so to speak, without some kind of low tunnel or some kind of insulation. And so that's one of the places that our students get to go. And our students, again, they don't think about the fact of, I can get a tomato anytime. I don't understand what the big deal is. Why do they need to build this special geothermal greenhouse? But it allows the students in that place to all of a sudden kind of be hit with, oh, I never thought about the fact that I shouldn't be able to get a tomato year round. It takes being in that place, being out of your own comfort zone, going to that location, and again, getting the most out of that experience. And then, yes, there is a carbon emission associated with you being there, but if you're able to bring that knowledge back and then make better food choices later on, then that's where I say those benefits of that experience outweighed the cost of the things that, like Maddie is going through and calculating for the university.
Absolutely. Well, do we have any more questions from our audience? Amy Cardwell's asking, what's one thing we can do in our homes to help the planet?
Conserve energy. That's probably the easiest one. And similar to kind of Meatless Monday, it's amazing just by lowering your temperature 1 degree cooler or 2 degrees cooler, your thermostat 2 degrees cooler in the winter time, or setting it at 2 degrees higher and when the AC is running in the summer months. Just those simple changes. Maybe on the short term you notice it, but in the long term you don't even really notice that change. But the amount of energy that you can conserve by just that simple notion is exponential. And especially if you start adding that up year after year after year. Another one is related to water. And so when most people think about carbon emissions, they don't necessarily associate water with carbon. But if you think about it, in order to treat water, which we certainly do obviously in this country, that water treatment facility is running energy to treat the water. There might be, depending on where you're at, there might be water that's actually, or energy that's being used to transport it from the facility also to your home. So conserving a little bit of energy, turning the classic things that you hear, turning off the faucet. Actually, if you have a energy efficient and water efficient dishwasher, unless you're filling your sink up with water and washing all of your dishes with the water off, you're actually conserving energy by using the dishwasher. So just those small little things that you might not necessarily even think about can certainly also have broader implications. And then like Maddie said, and her and her friends may have also discussed some others, so by all means please chime in with other things you've chatted about. But going back to the plastic, using bars of shampoo rather than bottles of shampoo, locally sourcing fruits and vegetables within your homes. If you have a small little plot, grow some of your own produce. Just see what works. You have to fight the squirrels and the birds, but as I say, they all have to eat too. So those kinds of fun little things allow you to get outdoors and be creative, and just you never know what you might be capable of doing until you try it. Maddie, have you and your friends thought of any others that I know you all again are kind of down a rabbit hole in the sense of things that you're thinking about.
I was also just going to add that it also saves money for you when you're conserving energy. I grew up, my dad is an electrician. He was big on conserving energy. He gets mad at me every time I come home because I take way too long showers. But that's also something that me and my friends talk about. Since we're going to be paying for our utilities, may as well try to conserve energy as best as possible because it saves us money. So that's another thing to think about.
Absolutely. LED light bulbs, again, you don't realize, and I think that's the biggest thing and why I said earlier with sustainability, it's about small little changes. If you try to all of a sudden go, completely off the grid or just live this drastically different lifestyle, it's not sustainable, no pun intended. And that it's kind of like a diet, right? When you try to deprive yourself of something, it's eventually going to fail. You're just going to give in. And so, if you just make these small, tiny little changes, they happen and you don't even realize the broader implications of positive impacts that you're having on, not just your local community, but also the broader global communities. And they're happening without you, again, even necessarily realizing it.
Yeah. Now, Maddie, you were going to study abroad in the spring, and unfortunately you couldn't, which meant that you got to work on the calculator. Thank you. What program were you going to go on?
Funnily enough, I was thinking about the Iceland program for the future. I was thinking about initially semester at sea or Harlexton. And also I had talked to one of my other advisors, and he suggested a more local program just because you get very immersed in the culture, which I was thinking about a lot more than the bigger programs. But I'll probably end up doing a winter or summer, and Iceland fits perfectly for that. So
awesome. Oh, that's a great program choice. We were just on the phone Monday or Tuesday. I don't know, all these days kind of blend together. with the University of East Anglia in Norfolk, England. And they have one of the top sustainability programs in the world. And that's an exchange partner. And one of the things about exchanges, not to try to talk you into anything, or anyone else out there, of course I'm trying to talk you into studying abroad. But one of the things about exchanges is you pay Western Kentucky tuition. And then that covers your tuition in the other country. You have to pay for your plane ticket and your housing and everything when you get there. But it's well, significantly less expensive than semester at sea, which is kind of an expensive program. But then you have, I mean, we are two countries separated by the same language, but there isn't as much of a language barrier studying in the UK as there would be, say, studying in China, for example.
Yeah, that was a big factor for me for coming into college wanting to study abroad. I wanted to do a semester because of the ability to use scholarships on the cost of attendance. So that's a really big help, in my opinion. And I think it does drive a lot of students to study abroad because of all the scholarship opportunities.
We have some really great scholarship opportunities. We have the World Topper Scholarship Program, which is a very generous scholarship program that Western Kentucky offers. Then, we had 21 students receive Gilman, which is amazing. If you are Pell Grant eligible, if you have a Pell Grant and you have above a 3.0, you're costing yourself money by not applying for a Gilman scholarship. And those are up to $8,000. If you go to a country where the language, you don't have to be studying the language, you can be studying in English. But like China, a strategic language, China, somewhere in the Arab world, Brazil, or a Portuguese-speaking country, all of those countries, you are eligible for even more money. So yes, study abroad can be expensive, but it can also be very affordable. And if you plan in advance and think about some of the different programs that you might want to go on, you can do so for not much more than studying here in Bowling Green. Norfolk it's nice. It's really nice. We also have a nice exchange. Sorry, that's another rabbit hole I can go down forever. But about 20 minutes from Harlexton is University of Lincoln, which is a wonderful campus. And I mean, it's very much a college town, kind of like Bowling Green. But that's also a really great place to study. But we've got exchanges in other countries in Europe, and most European universities are teaching pretty much their full curriculum in English as well as whatever their local language is. So you shouldn't necessarily be intimidated on the language side. But there are a lot of study abroad programs that focus on sustainability. So there are a lot of different options out there. And I cannot agree with Leslie more that experiencing other countries and the way that each country has a different way of solving its own problems and problems that face it. And humans have been living with the environment since the very beginning, and we've learned how to conquer it. And now we've got to learn how to conquer ourselves, and the damage that we've done to the environment. And there are a lot of different ways of doing that. And, we can get these ideas from all over the world and bring them back and be very, very creative in the way that we solve these problems moving forward in the future. Because, and I hate to be the old man here, but, when I grew up, bottled water pretty much didn't exist, and now it's ubiquitous. And, unfortunately, your generation is going to have to clean up all that junk. And so, the more you can learn about how to do that and how to solve these problems, the less junk you're going to have to clean up, and the better your world is going to be in the world for your children. That concerns me a lot. Now I'll stop being the old man for a while. But Maddie, do you have any final words that you'd like to share with us, or where would you like to study abroad besides Iceland?
I think that I was originally thinking about Spain just because it's a very beautiful country, but obviously I think that I would choose like an English-speaking country since I'm not studying a language. I'm really open to anything. I love to travel. I would love to go to all the countries in the world if I could. So
Great. Leslie, do you have any final words that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I would just add that I tell all of our students and students who might come for a tour or thinking about whatever program they're thinking about, by that I mean degree program for their 4 years of study. No matter what your area of interest is, certainly take advantage of a study abroad experience for all of the reasons that we've outlined, and there are even more. And also really, again, as you're there, as you were just saying, learn about that place because it has its own uniquenesses and it has things. What can you learn about if we're thinking about sustainability or how to live a better life here and how to be a better steward of the planet? Bring what's working over there and bring it back home with you. Try it out here. Just again, one of the easiest things you can do is just educate yourself. Just see what's going on over there. Why do they have this activity happening in country X, whatever that might be. Can I try that back home? If you're really going to the location with that open mind, and truly keeping an open mind the entire time, that don't just be an American plopping over into another country, become part of that location. Really try to learn and bring those back and share them far and wide. And then that, we talked about offsets for carbon. That's part of your offset, really. Like, it's not your direct monetary offset. You're not planting a tree to absorb the emissions from the plane ride that you took, but you are actually able to come back and help offset it in spades, in the sense that you are able to share that information, to do the Maddie and get her group of friends together that they are going to live in a sustainable house in the future. Whatever it might be, do it. Just break the comfort zone and do it, for sure. If you're ever in doubt and you need someone else to convince you to study abroad, I'm your girl. I'm all in. I'm all about travel, for sure. Again, there is a lot of irony being a sustainability director for the university, but I also do have to travel quite a bit for my research and for other things. So it's all about balance. Lifestyle changes, little things. It's all about balancing. And as long as you achieve that balance, don't be hard on yourself. If you do get the burger the one time, whatever it is, just know that you're balanced in those decisions. And that's sustainability is about the long game. And that's the long game of, did you live a sustainable lifestyle? Did you make those better choices as best as possible when possible?
That's great. Thank you. We're very fortunate. Dr. North, you're a faculty member, but just like Western Kentucky Applied Research, you're doing the work that you research as Director of Sustainability. And Maddie, you're taking full advantage of the kinds of research opportunities that are available at Western Kentucky University. And those are the things that I think make us special as a school, and the kind of relationship that our students have with our faculty and the commitment that faculty have to helping students grow, especially Kentucky students.
And I would just quickly add too, Maddie, yes, she's part of the program that I'm also a part of from a faculty position, but you don't have to be involved in the environmental studies major to be involved in these projects on campus. We are always looking for students who want to do cool projects. Maybe there's something you want to try out or some research that you want to do. So don't ever hesitate to reach out to us, and we will try to support you in any way that we can, whether that be help get a grant, maybe a small scholarship, academic credit, whatever we can do to help create those applied experiences for you. We're all in. I learned just as much from them, and Maddie's teaching me things now about the carbon footprinting and some of the questions that she has. She stumps me all the time with a question like, I don't know. So we learn as much from the students doing these projects as the other way around. So certainly, by all means, always reach out to us. There is no end to the applied experiences that you can get at this university, so take advantage of them for any students out there who may be watching now or later.
Great. Thank you both so very much. Dr. North, thank you. Maddie, thank you. And I wish you the best in the rest of the semester. Knock out those finals.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.